Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan. We are back here in Studio 130, back in the saddle with John Hendrickson for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the gold standard in Iowa conservative entertainment. John, welcome back in studio.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
I'm glad it is. You're probably going to need to slide the microphone just a little closer to yourself.
Yeah.
So John was on the disabled list for a little while.
Yes, yeah.
Still not back to 100%, but he's here, ready to. And we really need you right now.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons we didn't have as many episodes is because these things are happening. We didn't have John here to fill us all in. But one of the things that I know we want to cover today is Governor Tim Walz being picked as the vice presidential nominee for the Democrats, and more than just the horse race stuff of that, because we've talked in the past about Minnesota versus Iowa and the stark difference, and we're gonna get to all of those things. We do have several housekeeping items we got to take care of right away here before we go any further, John. The Iowa State Fair kicks off tomorrow. We're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, so we'll probably come back with some other coverage of that. But
That's right, yeah.
Not quite the political spectacle this year that it has in years past, just because it's a general election. But make sure if you have a chance, get out to the Iowa State Fair. But perhaps more importantly, John, what's coming up this week?
It's the 150th birthday of Herbert Hoover.
Yeah.
Celebration August 10th.
Are you having a party?
Yes, yeah.
You are? What are you? Yeah. How are you going to celebrate?
So, I'll just celebrate quietly at home. I wanted to go to West Branch, but I won't be able to.
I did note they're having a ceremony, groundbreaking on the new museum and everything that they're doing. So that's exciting that they're getting that started. So
they are, yeah.
Do you know how long that's supposed to take until that's completed?
I think about a year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll have to get back over there and check it out.
Yeah. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too. So anyway, a big day for both John and the state of Iowa to remember President Herbert Hoover. And here we are months into not having our Herbert Hoover bobblehead here on the table for the podcast.
Yeah, that's my fault.
Disappointing. So, okay, well, I know we did check in with you once or twice over the last month or so, but there's, as folks that are relatively new to the podcast may not know, you're a native Minnesotan and still follow Minnesota politics fairly closely, right? And so you obviously have a take on Governor Tim Walz. Despite the fawning media over this and what we're led to believe Governor Walz is or is not, what's your perspective on him, his political philosophy, and what he's done in Minnesota?
Yeah, Governor Walz is very progressive. I mean, very liberal, and he's being sold right now as sort of a heartland Democrat, a moderate. I don't know if you saw the video that was supposed to be spontaneous of Vice President Harris calling him to offer him the vice president position, and he was, in casual clothes with a camouflage hat.
Just happened to be sitting around wearing that.
Mm-hmm. And so they're going to try to sell him as a someone who's from the heartland, who likes to hunt and fish, and who was from and to a certain extent, when he was a member of Congress, he was from a swing district, and he did at one time get a fairly positive rating from the NRA. Mm-hmm. But since he has been governor, he has been probably one of the most left-wing governors in the nation. And if you look at what he's done, it's pretty alarming. Mm-hmm. And so if we just look at the fiscal side of the equation first, from a tax side, most governors have cut taxes. I mean, we have seen an incredible wave of states that have cut taxes.
Even in some blue states have done some things.
Yeah,
yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And of course, as you and I have talked about multiple times, Iowa has sort of led the way in sort of what we call the state tax cut revolution.
Yeah.
Governor Walz has done the opposite. Minnesota is one of the few states that has actually increased taxes. In fact, probably over $10 billion of tax increases that he's done, and most of it has been on upper income earners. And the result of these tax increases have been basically a mass exodus of people leaving Minnesota.
Oh, I was told that all of the they're so woke and we're so right wing that all the Iowans would be flocking to.
Yeah.
You mean that's not the case,
Not
right?
the
Oh,
case,
okay,
yeah,
all right.
yeah. And in fact, they came close to almost losing a congressional seat in the last census.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that businesses are starting to take note of this. The other thing is that Walz has increased government about 50%.
Yeah.
And Minnesota had a $19 billion budget surplus, and he spent every single penny of that. And that's just on the fiscal side. The other thing, he's embraced very radical environmental measures, whether it's mandates for electric vehicles, other sort of Green New Deal type measures. Now, especially in my corner where I come from, is a huge part of the economy is mining. And he's been very hostile to mining, and that's a huge part of the economy.
Well, he has sort of rejected at least something I read, rejected the traditional Democrat electoral coalition in Minnesota.
Yes.
Of the labor, the folks up in the Iron Range, and then the core of the Twin Cities, and it's really just more of a straight up liberal. Coalition.
Yeah, the teachers love him, and the public employee unions love him. But for example, I was talking with a group of construction workers. They were all union people. They can't stand him.
Well, this is interesting, and we're going to come back around to some of the tax and fiscal policies later on, but it seems to me, and I think it's been reported at least somewhat widely, that this wasn't a case of him being picked because he's a vote getter. He was picked because he is somebody that resonates with the base. Would that, does that seem to fit with your perspective?
I think you're right.
Yes, yeah. That it's not that he was, because the alternative was Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who had overperformed the generic ballot, was able to get votes in rural, small-town Pennsylvania, was able to go back and get labor voters. That's not Tim Walz, right?
No.
Tim Walz is getting whatever generic liberal Democrat gets you in Minnesota. Yeah. He's not going to the Iron Range. He's not going to the other small towns and picking up votes. So it's not really he's an ad in anything. It feels like just a base play.
Yes, yeah. And he, for example, when you had the BLM riots in Minneapolis, he literally let the city burn. And he called it righteous anger.
Well, he rejected the federal help.
Yes, yeah.
And that was far worse than it needed to be because of his.
I think it was a statue of Christopher Columbus to be torn down on the Capitol grounds. In terms of social policy, he basically has signed legislation having literally just basically said, come to Minnesota if you want an abortion. Come to Minnesota for gender care, if you want to, whatever, transgender care. And then what makes me mad is they're saying that J.D. Vance is weird, but yet this is the same governor that signed legislation to put tampons in boys' restrooms in schools.
Yes, as young as 10 years old.
And tell me that's not weird.
And
sick.
And I don't have it in front of me, but the it's not just that the legislation on some sort of gender sanctuary, but there were penalties attached to parents that were denying that for their own children. It was really getting in between the parent and the child and interjecting government into that. That strikes. Look, we care about the fiscal issues, but those are issues that strike at the very core of our society, is that relationship between the parent and the child. So
the other thing he's done that also has a fiscal impact, it'll have an enormous impact, is basically he has established free college, free health care, and driver's license for illegal aliens.
Oh.
And he's been wanting the entire state, not just cities, to become a sanctuary state, which is a disaster if that happens.
So
legalize marijuana.
Yeah, it's just a whole raft of really left wing things that would not have been imaginable in. Minnesota is, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, the most liberal or left leaning of the Great Lakes states or the upper Midwest. Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, maybe Ohio. Throw into that mix, right? That really shifted a lot in the 2010s, leading up into Trump in 2016. Minnesota is the one that, although it shifted, still was fairly left-leaning, but is a Midwestern state with largely Midwestern values. Mm-hmm. And it really is jarring to see how far to the left Governor Walz and the DFL have taken the state of Minnesota. And then I guess where I'm going with that is, and now that is part of the message that is on the national ticket.
Yes.
So the national ticket now represents, and we know this, John, because we follow this stuff, a huge leap to the left. And that's just where their party is at.
Yeah. Yeah, this probably the Harris Walz ticket is probably the most left-wing ticket in our history.
And as our listeners may not know, you are a student of history and presidential politics. So that's an educated statement that you're making.
And it's even probably I would argue it's even more left-wing than the McGovern.
Yeah, that would be the one that would come to mind. Was that 72? Yeah.
Yep. The other thing Walz did was, and we've talked about before, is that they changed the flag. And that I'm still upset about that. And now the flag looks like a flag. It's almost like a replica of the Somali flag.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And there was no reason behind it.
What is it with liberals and needing to remake flags? They just have this thing about flags. I don't get it. We did it in my city, Urbandale. Had to make a new flag, and it's now some really modern, boring, curvy things on the same colors.
Yeah.
As the Minnesota, I don't understand. It means something.
The left just wants to destroy history and tradition and replace it with something that fits their ideology,
their version of modernity.
Yes, yeah.
And you tear down everything that is old and everything that represents any tie to the past, so that you can remake it in your vision of what the future ought to be.
Yeah. Well, you taught me too. Excuse me. You taught me an important lesson too about architecture and how liberals have you have ugly buildings, and that's another thing that a lot of progressives have championed over the years. Whether it's
brutalism or whatever architectural style is, but it creeps into the it's. We can go on. We should do a whole episode on architecture someday, John, but. It's almost meant not even just to take us to someplace new. Like if you want to put something modern looking, okay, fine. But it's almost meant to destroy that sense of community. I mean, you put some concrete bunker up in place of some classic buildings. There's no connection to the past. You're forcing people to forget. And anyway, that's not what we came here to talk about. However, it is interesting because, the whole flag thing. But so clearly, Tim Walz, I saw he's, drew praise from the Socialist Party, the Democrat Socialists of America. Bernie Sanders was excited about that pick. So Kamala Harris makes a play to the base. Maybe that's the right thing to do. I don't know. They have some new enthusiasm right now. And maybe this takes Minnesota off the map. I don't know. I always think that's kind of fool's gold for Republicans. They talk about it. But now that the ticket on each side is set, where do you think things stand? It's not as good for Donald Trump as it was a month ago. There's no question about that. But
I'm actually, and I'm not a, I tend to be more pessimistic about things, but right now I'm a little worried.
Mm-hmm.
One thing is there's a massive, I would call it a cover-up going on in the media. Harris is basically doing what Biden did in 2020 and doing a basement campaign.
Mm-hmm.
She's not talking about issues. She's just going on and giving these basically vague stump speeches. She's not even doing interviews with liberal media. And they're basically scrubbing her record, a very left-wing record, whether it was from her time as a prosecutor or attorney general, as her time for example, they're even denying that she was the border czar, and that was
just rewrite history the way they want it.
And then what was that? The website, the GovTrack, that had rated her the most liberal senator. That was
just
scrubbed.
Erase it.
Yeah.
Well, some of these things though now, and I'm appreciative that at least on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, that you still, those things aren't being purged there.
Yeah.
But some of the videos and the clips of things that she said, especially in the 19 leading up to the 2020 caucuses when she was a presidential candidate herself then, just some of the statements are just stunningly liberal, encouraging people to be as woke as possible and talking about, every left-wing thing. And I get it. It's a presidential primary. You lurch to the left, but I have every reason to believe that that's where she's at.
Yes. Yeah.
Politically. I'm with you. I think she has got some buzz. I think she has Democrats excited because they don't have to try and defend Joe Biden anymore. But I don't know. She's so unlikable and so unpopular. And her favorable rating is still underwater. And she's not a good candidate. I don't know how she gets any more popular with the American people than she is today.
Yes, yeah.
And everyone knows what they think about Donald Trump, but they don't know for sure what they think about Vice President Harris. And I think there still is an opportunity for her to be defined in a way that showcases some of that.
Yeah.
So, we will see. I mean, obviously, Donald Trump's still going to win Iowa. He is still winning in places like Georgia and Arizona. And I actually still think probably if I had to bet today, I think Donald Trump has a small electoral college advantage. But it is a close race.
Yeah. And I think, the Trump campaign, they need to focus on the issues. Immigration, the economy. Those are the issues that Americans are, and expose the failed record of Harris and Walz and play the sound bites, of the radical sound bites of both Walz and Harris, of the radical things they've said that demonstrate that, what they stand for is really. I remember there was a campaign commercial that Governor Reynolds did, basically talked about, the insanity of what the left was doing, and just talking about common sense.
Yep.
And that's what we need to get back to, because really what they're standing for is that's the weirdness. That's the insanity.
Well, Donald Trump became president on those issues and governed on issues of immigration and the economy and tax policy. They are the spots where he wins. And everything else that's going on in our world. And if you go think about what was covered at the Republican convention, run on that. Run on these issues that are critical to, it's not just the next few years in American history. I mean, we're talking about things that will define this country for the long term. Do we want to be the great nation we have been, that is prosperous and free with this set of values that we have had in place for over 200 years, as much as they have eroded? Or do we want to take the Harris-Walz radical, I mean, truly radical? Say what you want about Donald Trump and how he is unconventional. The policies are not radical. The policies are very conventional, right-of-center Republican principles. The principles that they want are way out there.
Yes, yeah.
Way out on the left wing that will change the way our society and our lives work. And my point is, then let us litigate this election on that and make that contrast. And I know they can and I know they want to, but it takes discipline to say, this is what they're going to do to your family budget. And this is what they're going to do with regard to immigration. And this is what they're going to do with your children and the schools and your rights over them. And this is what they're going to do with the Second Amendment. And this is what they're going to do with foreign policy. Your sons are going to Europe and the Middle East and to potentially Taiwan to fight somebody's wars. We need to have that debate because those issues are so profoundly important to the individual American, the individual family, and the future of this country that we cannot get bogged down in small ball and settling scores.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And the other thing is, I was thinking about, they're one of their main arguments against Trump is, we have to save democracy, is a threat to democracy. And I thought, well, look at President Biden. He was upset about some of the decisions handed down by the court this term. Mm-hmm. So what does he do? What does the progressives always do? Because if, in this case, the Supreme Court, if they don't do what they want, mm-hmm. they are going to try to circumvent the Constitution and undermine the court with a court packing scheme, just like Roosevelt tried to do in the 1930s.
And it is so it's so hypocritical.
Yes.
I remember in 2018 when we were doing judicial nominating reform in Iowa, a very modest change to the plan, and the lectures that we got from the left over how we were attacking the courts and attacking the rule of law and interjecting politics into the judiciary and every sort of hyperbolic argument against us. And yet turn around and now you want to pack the U.S. Supreme Court because you're not getting your preferred outcomes out of it?
Yeah.
I mean, who's attacking the norms? Who's attacking democracy?
That's right.
It's those folks on the left.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any time for that. No. And if we want to talk about upholding democracy, how many election cycles is this in a row now where they have coronated their nominee?
That's right. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what their voters think. Oh, you mean you might want somebody else? No, you get Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Oh, you might want Bernie Sanders or Pete Buttigieg. Sorry, no, you get Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Oh, and now this time, no. You could have had a chance to have an open primary and elect who you wanted, but we're going to play this game, and now here you get Harris.
Yeah.
And that's not democracy, John.
Yeah. And plus, what I would consider a massive cover-up of what's going on with the president, possibly the decline mentally and physically, and basically he's disappeared. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden Harris comes on the scene as basically the acting president and now becomes the nominee through this virtual process and
virtual process. Yeah, that's every.
But they want to end the filibuster in the Senate. Mm-hmm. They want to undo the Electoral College. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to basically undo everything to get their agenda through.
Yeah.
If they can't get their way, that's how they do business.
Yeah. Nope, the ends justify the means. Yeah. And what I guess maybe to put a very finer point, anytime you hear them saying saving democracy, they're lying.
Yes. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. That is not the goal.
Yeah.
Anytime you hear that, just strike a line through that and insert, we want to be able to do an end around to do it however we want to get our liberal goals done.
Yeah.
And if we need to make up a whole bunch of nonsense along the way about Russian collusion or whatever else, we'll just make it up.
Yeah.
And the media will cover it for us.
Yes. Yeah. So
it's all a load of crap, John.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it comes back to my point. That's why we have to fight this on ideas and what is really at stake. And nobody is going to help conservatives in this cause.
No.
So,
and going back to Iowa and Minnesota, and that's why I think Iowa is doing so much better than Minnesota, is because of the policies. And look at, Governor Reynolds versus Governor Walz, and it's just two vastly different philosophies of government. And why Iowa is doing so much better economically and socially. In Iowa is, we came out of the pandemic stronger.
Yep.
We're doing a lot better financially. We're more stable.
Well, I saw that Governor Walz set up a hotline that during COVID you could call to snitch on your neighbors if you were if you were doing bad on your COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
I think I want to close on this, John. Is to try and bring this full circle. Is that you can now take the Walz record in Minnesota and where they're going, and that is absolutely now the representation of where Democrats want to go nationally. And let's compare it to Iowa. Not only where are we now and what have we done, but where are those two different states heading? I mean, barring something dramatic, we know the direction that Minnesota is going.
Yes.
And it's going to look a whole lot like a lot of other failed cities around the country of economic decline, social decay, lawlessness. Or you can have Iowa of lower taxes, personal freedom, prosperity, a growing economy. Or you can have that. Yeah. And that comparison isn't just important for us, which side of the border we live on. It's important because now this country has a decision to make. Do you want to live in an America that looks more like Iowa, or do you want to live in an America that looks more like Minnesota?
Yeah.
And I love Minnesota,
yes,
John.
Yeah, no.
But would you rather live in the Des Moines area, or would you rather live in the Twin Cities right now?
I pick Iowa. Yeah.
Every day of the week.
Yeah.
And that is the case that now needs to be made to the folks across the country.
Yeah, and Walz has openly defended socialism. Yeah. He said it's just like a neighborly policy.
Yep.
I mean, it's just unreal.
So all those times that we have bragged about Iowa, that we have talked about how many great things have happened and we need to showcase to the country, it's not so that we can brag at a national conference, and it's not so that we can get a rating from an agency. Those things are great and we love it. It is so that we can make the case in this idea of the laboratories of democracy that this is the best path forward for our country. We've done it at Iowa. We've proven it works. And now we need America to understand what the path forward is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's good to be back. Another piece of housekeeping that at the end here, John, we're got some big announcements coming up over the next few weeks around here. So there's going to be some studio changes, going to be some programming changes, and I'm just teasing that just a little bit. But it's really, really some exciting stuff around the corner. I'm sure in typical fashion I will under-deliver on that promise, but we are really excited to see what lies ahead for the ITR media endeavors.
Yeah.
So, all right.
That'll be exciting.
Good. All right. Well, it was good to have you back. I think we got somewhere today. So, all right, folks, thanks a lot for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends and neighbors. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.